These are recollections of 10 still photographs I made several years ago. This is the first photograph I ever made with the direct intention of making art. I had bought myself a 35mm camera and thought to set up a mock studio with a black bedsheet and some cheap lighting. I had a friend who wished to be photographed, and so I just turned black to match the background. I do not recall why we chose to blindfold her, nor how the tissue entered the picture. With my final frame of film, I chose to try a double exposure, and this was the result. I no longer speak to the girl in the photograph, though I imagine she is doing well. To this day, I am used to seeing my father from this angle, an angle I imagine many children see their parents from. From years in the back seat, I got used to only seeing my dad's eyes in the reflection of the rearview mirror, though when I look at this photograph today, I can't help but see an abundance of frames. The frame of the photograph wraps around the frame of the windshield. The frame of the rearview mirror wraps around the two frames of my father's sunglasses. Though most of his face is cut off, my father's expression is carved into every feature of his face. I think he was worried about the traffic at the time. One day, while wandering with my camera, I came across a man sitting on his stoop. He was unmoving, immune to the world around him, perfectly still, and thus seemed the perfect subject for a photograph. I had just built up the courage to walk over and ask permission to take his picture when a friend called me over to look at a light pattern on the ground. When I returned, the man was gone, and did not return for several minutes. I made the exposure anyway, of only the chair missing its sitter. When I look at the photograph today, I still see the man as if he is the chair, or at least they have become one in my memory. This picture was taken at a local movie theater. I had gotten permission to photograph the theater for a project I was working on. At the time, I was too skittish and shy to ask any of the employees to take their picture, and so I avoided them as best I could. I had set up the shot. I remember being interested in the fake beads of water on the drink cooler. While I was making the exposure, the man in the photo entered the frame to start his shift. He did not seem to mind my presence, so I continued to make the picture. I made 4 exposures of this man. This was the only frame where he was looking at the camera. It is badly underexposed. In this picture, I wanted to capture the emotion of a dream. I saw this moment of simply a strange shadow on a textured table and asked the unknowing performer to pause while I slowly set up the view camera I had begun to work with. The exposure was spoiled, so I decided to reenact the event as best I could from memory. I do not know what the photograph means, if anything, though this is often how I feel about dreams. In the winter of 2006, my mother broke her left shoulder. In the winter of 2010, she broke the right. I returned home for a few weeks, and a few times a day gifts or visitors would arrive for my mother. We soon acquired an abundance of flower arrangements, and this one caught my interest. The base is unusually boxy, and the shiny plastic sadly attempts to encapsulate the blossoms. For all of their protective packaging, they almost seem more fragile. The light on the plastic gives the appearance of a fragile glass, and I saw beauty and life wrapped in a fragile frame. It reminded me of my mother. This is a self-portrait I made shortly after I began working with photography. I had a close friend take the exposure while I positioned myself in front of the camera. The space is insignificant and my posing awkward. After making several exposures, I became frustrated and gave up. In printing the photograph, I decided to remove myself completely from the frame. I cut out my form in paper and placed it over myself when exposing the print in the darkroom. The light was unexpectedly able to pass through the paper, and my image appeared, despite my own effort to try and remove it. Suddenly, it felt like an appropriate self-portrayal. In 1984, my dad began building a log cabin in upstate New York. He built it using a log cabin kit with pre-cut pieces of wood and instructions for how to assemble them, like a giant set of Lincoln logs. Though it is only when I look at this photograph that I begin to see it as a toy. It appears a model for an ideal structure, with every detail in place, a toy hose attached to the wall, and curtains neatly framing the windows. I know this place so well, and yet this photograph makes it feel foreign, like a toy that doesn't belong to me. I did not make this photograph, nor do I know who did. Nor can I recall precisely when it was made or where it was taken. The photograph shows an apartment building at night, with lights illuminating certain squares and darkness consuming the rest. The center of the photograph is dominated by a row of balconies. In the almost exact center, there are two balconies elaborately decorated for Christmas, with lights, candy canes, and snowmen. They are the only balconies with any shred of decoration. This could be because they are one of the few balconies celebrating the holiday, but I prefer to think of them as stubborn celebrators, being festive in the middle of July simply because they can. I enjoy this photograph. It reminds me of home. Admittedly, It has been some time since I took a still photograph. However, recently while in New York City, I felt the urge to pick up my camera and take some exposures. The house in the picture is one that used to belong to a close friend of mine, though she had moved out a few months before the picture was taken. The new owners had put a strange statue in front, and I decided to take the picture to show my friend. After I developed the negative, I noticed a slight part in the curtains of the front windows, which revealed a slight view into the interior of the home, and an odd thing struck my eye. I enlarged this section of the photograph, and what I think I see fills me with a sense of mystery, something I never thought I would see in the window of a home staring back at me. Here it is. Look at it. Do you see what I see?